Joost Rekveld is for us definitely a very important filmmaker because he's one that is able to bridge these different figures of being a researcher, a filmmaker, and really experimenting with the different medium that he has been working on, starting from analog film medium when he started in the early 90s up to analog video techniques or digital techniques. In that sense, it's really a complex researcher, scientist, artist that is able to bring all these aspects together in amazing visual, powerful results and films. And as such, he is also continuing a tradition of abstract filmmakers that is quite strong in Holland, as we have seen with Bart Vechter and Peter Strauken, and in a little way maybe Martin Visser, is the one that is continuing that tradition and bringing it out of Holland as well.
Well, when I started studying, I was really interested in film, but I was also very much interested in electronic music, and I got partly brainwashed, you could say. I was studying in The Hague at the Department of Sonology at that time. I studied there for 1 year, and The Hague is really a representative of a certain view of electronic music or contemporary music, which still exists and which is very different than experimental filmmaking. Then I started to become really interested in film, and I was a projectionist for a long time. And at some point I started projecting also short films, and I discovered experimental films and especially abstract films. And basically by seeing these films I started realizing that you could also do some kind of composition purely with images, like sort of having the ideas of composition in sound, like electronic music is some kind of organization of sound. You can also have organization of abstract images on the screen. That's how I started thinking about film. But what I realized is that if you start thinking about composition, there's a very important thing which comes before composition. It's like, what is it what we actually are composing? And to decide that, you find yourself in a situation that you have to build machines or devices which can actually produce these images, in my case. And then I want to talk about Andrew Pickering, and he's a sociologist of science, and he has this great idea which he used to describe what scientists do in a lab, and he calls it the mangle. And the mangle in Dutch is the mangel. It's like, you know, it's this thing you turn, you put your wet laundry in it and it comes out dry. And his idea is that if you look at the history of scientific research, there's lots of things like what is science, and some people say, well, science is some kind of method, some science is a bunch of procedures. And he basically said, well, you can't really predict. You have the mangle, and what goes in are scientists, procedures, ideas, and machines. And you turn, and what comes out is the same, but transformed. And you can't really predict if the scientists are going to be transformed, or the concepts are going to be transformed, or the machines are going to be transformed. Something will be transformed. I find it great as a way to think about how artists work, and especially artists who work with technology, because that's basically what I do all the time. When I build machines, I build these machines, I have ideas, and they are put in the machines, and then I switch on the machine, it doesn't work, or it does something I didn't expect. And then my ideas change, and I change, and everything changes, and it's this mangle, and it sort of keeps going until I say, well, stop, this is the end of the film.
The relationship with Joost dates back to 2004, actually, when the Film Museum, back then under Rinagen, commissioned Joost to make a big program and an installation called A House in Four Dimensions. That was in 2004, that's when I met him first. And I was introduced to his films and his way of programming and curating, which is still actually one of the things that he does very often. The films of Joost entered the collection of I in 2015, so last year, basically 2 years ago now, and that's when we started immediately talking about how to proceed with, let's say, what work to do and which films needed more attention and more care. Together with Joost Rekveld, we decided to collaborate on this restoration project where we focused on his early films, the ones they really did from the beginning of his career in 93, 4, 5, and 6, and because they were in need of attention and care, and they had been a little bit neglected in the past years. So we decided to get a strategy, and we decided from the beginning to do this restoration on a digital level, so to use digital technique to make new digital masters and digital distribution packages, which means distribution copies for the cinema. We have worked on number 2, which is the first film that Joost made on Super 8. So there we had to deal with the challenge of changing from Super 8 to DCP, which is the standard digital cinema package of today. And this was a collaboration with Studio 1 or Studio 1 by Carol Doyne. Because he scanned the Super 8s, and we have done digital restoration and grading here at the laboratory Hagafilm. For number 5, for example, which originally was a 3-screen expanded cinema exhibition, we took a radical choice together with Joost again to combine it into a widescreen single channel version. So this is maybe the most radical, further away from what it was originally projected in the analog version. We've made now a digital version of it. And again, color grading plays an important role because color is so much important for Joost films. Number 7, on the other hand, a totally different story because it was hand painted by Joost. So we had to deal with issues of paint that became very sticky and clotted in a film reel that was very difficult to handle. So we had to first deal with handling the original material before we could work on it. And again, at the end, maybe some compromises had to be made because we couldn't use it in its entirety, but we had to go back to different sources and combine it and color grade it in a way that, let's say, the differences between the two sources were not so visible. And all of this, the results are still very beautiful, and with Joost we are both happy of how it came to be. But important to say is that these versions, let's call them versions, digital versions, do not substitute the analog versions, which still continue to exist, but are a reinterpretation with modern techniques of his work, also with intention of making them more available to a wider audience.